Hi, thank you for being here. This is the Caleb and Jody Moore podcast, episode number 6. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have Senator Breanne Davis. Thank you for being here, Senator Davis. We're excited. Jody and I have known you for a long time, and we're excited that you've been here. You've been in your position for 7 years now. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And your official title is you are whip of
the Senate Republican Caucus.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a big honor. So
yeah.
You stay busy. When they ask you to do your job, you're on the phone all the time.
Yes.
So you never get off of it for the whole session. Right. You're on there. And I read something that said there was somewhere in the 16, 17, 1800 bills that were put in the Arkansas session drafted this year, and then some around 1,000 or 1,100 were codified into law. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's probably about right. I think we average normally around 2,000 bills a session, and we were a little light this session compared to others.
Breanne, that's where I commend you completely for being able to focus and process through all of those bills. That would get absolutely confusing. So does it get mind-boggling, or can you handle it well? Yes. Are you in it when you're in it kind of thing?
Yeah, when you're in it, and you're trying to keep up. I mean, no one can keep up 100%. Like, you do feel like you're always behind, and it is very intense. And stressful, but in a good way, you know?
On average, how many bills would you say you look at in a day when you're in session?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. You know, at the beginning of session, it's lighter. People are kind of slower to file their bills. But as session goes and things pick up, I mean, you're talking about, we may... towards the end of session, we were on the Senate floor, I think 3 days in a row for 10 hours voting on bills. And that did not include committees, what we were seeing in committees and voting on.
Wow.
And, we easily had triple digits of bills that we were voting on in a single day.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy.
That's awesome.
But you're an expert. So you're 7 years. This is your, did you say fourth session?
Fourth session.
Fourth session in 7 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. So you're an expert in all this. So people just call you and say, "Hey, you got this figured out by now." They don't even have to give their opinion to you anymore, right? They just let you go, right?
Yeah. Anyone that says they're an expert is lying. But you do really, dig in and understand the process and all the personalities. I mean, politics is a people business. It's, watching human behavior. You learn a lot about people, and, meshing that together with policy. It's fun and rewarding.
That's well said. And I love that about you. We've always admired that about you. I think the fact that you pick up on, energy, if you will, from other people. You sense when to speak up, when not to, and then you listen well. And I love that. I think Caleb and you have had great discussion over the years and you've always listened to us. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's like I tell constituents all the time, if there's an issue and you don't tell me about it, then I just won't know about it. There's too many things happening in the state.
There's so much
going on.
So it's like, so you want to be approachable, and you want to be reachable for those people that have maybe an issue to bring up. I love that.
Absolutely.
Now she is an expert in one thing.
Yes.
And the personality test. What's it called?
Oh, yes.
Enneagram.
Yes. She's a professional at that.
Do you want to speak to your Enneagram?
Yes.
No.
What are you? Just what number?
Can that be the topic of this podcast?
No. See, she tried to get me to take one of those, and I said no. Because she would read me every time. And she already labeled me.
We already know what you are,
She already
Caleb.
labeled me.
That's right.
And I was like, no, I'm not taking it. I'm giving her an advantage over my
true.
What is your number, Breanne?
I'm an 8-wing 7.
Okay.
I'm a strong 7 and a stronger 8. So
that's awesome. Yes. And that was the Challenger, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And what's Caleb?
No.
I can't remember. What did we say he was?
No.
I think it was a 2.
We pegged him.
Maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay. So moving forward, I just want, as a mom of 4, as a local Arkansan, Russellvillian, I think you have so much to bring to the table. And I think our listeners today will be able to relate to who you are as a mom, as a businesswoman, as everything that you bring to the table. And so one thing that you seem to be very passionate about is something I think silently we're all passionate about as well, which is health and health for our children, and what that looks like with the red dye and the discovery really of the horrific things that it's doing to the children's bodies and the minds and even the adults as well, but what we're seeing the effects of. So what I'd love is you to elaborate on what that bill looks like for how you came up to the conclusion, how was it passionate to you, the red dye, and what all the bill entails, and where we stand in that today?
Yeah. Well, I think just over time, naturally, you sort of like migrate, maybe a lot of us, to gardening. Like the older we get, I don't know, we take on new hobbies. And gardening's very therapeutic, just grounding, being in the dirt. It just really, I think, keeps you grounded.
Yes. And speak to that. Are you still running your business, your flower?
Yes. I do still have a small flower farm, and it's harder this year because we've been in session. And so, but I do have close to 100 eucalyptus plants that are thriving right now. I cut a bunch for my mom yesterday.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I've got all my veggies and stuff in the ground just for our personal consumption.
Yeah.
But yes, so you kind of just, I think too, we live in obviously like a more global communication society with like social media, the internet, all that stuff. It's like we just can know so much more now than we did before. And just seeing, if I follow several people on Instagram, but you're seeing, what recipes look like in the EU versus America versus Canada. How many chemicals are legal in other countries versus our country and stuff like that. So there's just sort of, I think, been this awakening.
Yes, that's exactly what I feel. So tell me what you're seeing in Europe versus America. How far advanced are they compared to where we're at, and what do they allow right now?
Well, I kind of compare it to, or kind of frame it as, I think the EU is playing offense and the US is playing defense. So they have around 300 chemicals that they have approved, to be legal in their food, while the US has, 10,000 plus chemicals.
Wow.
So the EU, from what I understand, their standard is essentially like, we'll approve it once we know it's safe. Like once it's been through testing and, it has all these studies. The U.S., the FDA, they have food. It's generally recognized as safe, GRAS, GRAS. And so what they do is they say, well, we'll recognize it, that it's generally recognized as safe, and you really got to prove to us that it's killing people.
Oh.
So it's sort of backwards. Yeah, it's like, no, you have to really prove that it's causing cancer in a lot of people, and it's really harming health. And so anyways, those are broad generalizations.
Unfortunately, it's going to be potentially a generation before you can prove something or maybe not even a whole generation, but years.
Yeah.
Of damage.
Those studies just take so long. And what we're seeing in a lot of chemicals is that, a lot of these dyes are derived from petroleum. We're putting carcinogens in our body and,
or heavy metals. That are, I think they had formula that was out the other day. There was like 8 different brands of formula. All of them tested positive for aluminum or heavy metals in there. So it's like, how does that even get into baby formula, right? Yeah. And that's just crazy to me.
What motivated you specifically to be passionate about this bill?
Well, so in doing some research, this is sort of the balance, I think, in being a policymaker is, I would love to just wipe all these chemicals out of our food and say, like, they cannot be in our food. We want, because when you go to the grocery store and you say, I want to buy clean food, like you have to read all these ingredient labels that are super long. And then you can't even trust that like your produce is clean. Like, if they're injecting dye maybe into strawberries so they look more ripe. Or our produce is genetically modified, which over time has taken a lot of the nutrition out of it. So even if you're buying fruits at the grocery store that were shipped from somewhere across the globe because it's not in season here or we can't grow them, they've been sitting in, some air-controlled container thing for, maybe a couple months before they get over to us. Well, the chemicals and the things they have to use to keep the produce ripe and able to sell in a grocery store, think about what's in there and how that deprives probably that produce from the nutrients that if we were just growing it from the ground, soil, around our home like people used to, and picking it from there, it's not genetically modified. It has, if you're buying non-GMO seeds, heirloom seeds, then you're buying something or you're growing something that still has, all of the nutrients that it was intendedly created to have.
I love that.
Initially created to have. And so, but on the other side, you can't pass laws that make the shelves at your grocery store bare. you know, like then
That's
you're
true.
gonna have like outrage,
Another problem.
you
Yeah.
know, from people. And so we looked at California a couple of years ago,
Right.
passed a bill
Yeah.
that was exactly how I mirrored the bill that I ran, Senate Bill 9, Make Arkansas Healthy Again. They had a couple additional ingredients in that bill that since then the FDA has said, you know, by January 1 of 2027 or whatever, it cannot be used in foods anymore. So I took those out, and that left two ingredients, propylparaben, which you see in a lot of like baked packaged goods or like trail mix or whatever. It extends shelf life. But they're showing through some studies that it's an endocrine disruptor, hormone disruptor. It lowers sperm count in young men. So we put that in there, and also potassium bromate, which is essentially something that sort of just like bleaches bread products, and it helps flour be stronger, so it rises higher, it bakes
Fluffier.
more even. Yeah,
Yes.
it looks prettier to you in the grocery store.
Right,
Somehow,
right.
you know,
Yes.
Yeah.
we've let American culture and society tell us that our food must look perfect. Like,
It's
not
the
only should we
present-
look
Yeah.
perfect, but our food should look perfect.
Right.
Wow.
And we don't want to buy it if it has a bump on it or
Right.
looks uneven.
Deformed,
And
yes.
so, but that is our food industry and how they're presenting food to us. So, we just said basically by January 1 of 2027, it has to be out of food. It cannot, nothing on the shelves. And,
So that's 2 years or a year and a half. What, in your opinion, why the length of time there? If the recipes have already been developed, maybe over in Europe, is it a logistics and a business side of it, or is it because the recipes have already been created? Correct.
yes. So I've had some interesting conversations with that. I'll use Tyson as an example because, I talked to them and they said, well, usually we like to give companies 2 years to change recipes and phase out. And if you think about it, if you have something frozen or something on the shelf, everything has an extended shelf life.
Right.
And some of those ingredients are in that recipe, then if we just did, in 90 days, which is how most bills take effect and come into law. So if we said by, August 1-ish, you could no longer have those ingredients in your food, then that would be like a multi-million-dollar loss to those
Right.
companies.
Absolutely.
And so I'm, trying to, my point of view when I come to address an issue is like, can we work it out for everyone? I try to say like, can we get to like common ground on this first?
Awesome.
And a lot of times we can't, but sometimes we can. And
So
that's
for
where I
the-
want to start.
The businesses and the people
And the
kind of thing
consumer,
consumer
yes.
coming together.
And, so California, their state has like the largest economy of all the states in
Right.
the country. And
Right.
so, and
It's
that's
like,
where
it's like 7th or 8th globally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
I would
it's
believe
it's
that.
A
It's, like,
huge,
huge.
Yeah, it's a huge
Yes.
global market.
So
Yeah.
you kind of think like so that companies are going to adjust their recipes to sell in California.
Sure.
So I just thought, well, Arkansas can piggyback off that. And that's why I didn't include all the other dyes and all the other things, because I want to make sure that we're doing this in a responsible way.
Yes.
And, now I think the FDA is like really taking a whack at a lot of dyes
Yeah.
and stuff, which I'm so grateful
Yes.
for.
Aren't we all thankful?
Right.
Yes,
RFK's
yes.
definitely up the game. Which you knew that when he took office.
That's
Like,
right.
yeah,
I was
he
there for it.
gonna-
I was
he's-
ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were all excited about that.
Yeah.
And then, so to piggyback off of, so this is, the red dye, when this goes into effect, when?
I think he said, I want to say January of 2027.
2027. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in between then, also, let's talk about breakfast. I believe there's a free breakfast program you were discussing about
Yes.
in schools now. Has that gone into effect?
It will for the next school year.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
So
yeah.
August.
In
August.
August.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yep. So, yeah, I know. And it's interesting that it wasn't overwhelmingly controversial, but it is a little bit controversial too. So basically what we did is we said, like, all the kids in your school still have to apply if they qualify for like free or reduced lunch, which qualifies them for free or reduced breakfast. So they still have to push that and try to have federal reimbursement where they can. But with all the students that are left, then they all qualify for the free breakfast, and the school has to, show basically receipt to the state, and then we would reimburse. That money is coming from the medical marijuana fund, and
Okay.
there is a lot of money in there. a lot, and it can only be used for specific purposes. So I love that we prioritize making sure that kids are fed when they get to school, regardless of, what type of home they're coming from. We know they're there and they're all fed. And you can think about, even if you have food in your pantries and in your fridge, that sometimes you're running late, running out the door, and your kids did not get breakfast, And so, when they get to school, they're going to have something to eat, which is going to help empower their brain to learn and take in everything. And to me, I think that's a great use of money that we're getting from medical marijuana.
And speaking to that, lastly, is you also mentioned that now the schools will have an opportunity to use local farms and local maybe vendors to provide those breakfasts. Is that correct?
Yes, there's so much work that we need to do on that, but there's a program that we currently have within the Department of Ag, and they partner with our food nutrition services in our schools, and it's called Farm to School. And, it's basically like, agri is our biggest industry in Arkansas. And so, but it's also slowly dying off, when people realize like, oh, I'm not going to take over my family farm because I can't make a living. I can't support my family. So we're looking at ways to incentivize schools to want to use local meat, local vegetables, and build that back up over time. And that gets really complicated because the way that schools buy food, it's through certain vendors that are on a list. And, so we passed a bill a couple sessions ago that basically said schools, like hospitals, like UAMS, higher ed institutions, they need to purchase 10% of their food needs to come from like a local in-state. Okay. That sounds great. It was not a mandate, but it was like, hey, try to get 10%, right? But there's a lot of issues with that. And like one, you may say like Highland Dairy, they're an Arkansas based company, and I'm not picking on them. Like, we have milk from them all over the state, but they don't have a dairy farm in Arkansas. So they're getting the milk from somewhere else, but because they're here, and it's the same with some other companies that are based in Arkansas, but are getting food from other places, but it qualifies based on the definition as local food. So we have work to do, like I said, to correct that, and then also incentivize. I think instead of mandating in situations like that, we need to incentivize child nutrition directors to want to purchase food locally, because it's a lot of additional work. You got to find a tomato farmer and say, I don't need to just buy from you this week, but I need to buy from you all school year and these weeks, and I need this many pounds of,
Yes.
So like I said, it's something that is not immediate overnight, but building back up to say, hey, we get our meat from cattle that were grown and fed right here, not from South America somewhere that we don't know what's in it.
So the program itself is really great, the free breakfast, and I'm glad that it's coming from where it's coming from, like the money. I think that's a good cause. But I go back to say there's been a rise in ADHD, there's been a rise in cancer, there's been a rise in all these other things. And when the kids get to school and they've had nothing but a donut, or they've had nothing but cereal.
That's just easy.
Cereal. And or the bread that they've had is packed full of sugar. So then we say, well, they're bouncing off the walls. Yeah. And you need a pill for that.
Yep.
And that's where our struggle is as parents, and I know yours is too, is saying you don't have to give them a pill every time that they're jumping off the walls. They're just kids, number one.
Yep.
And maybe it's because of what we're feeding them.
Yep.
And so I think the program is good. I hope that there's some guidelines on the program to say what we're feeding them once they get to school, or else the teachers may be like, no, you need to go back home and get some food, because what we're feeding you here is making you jump off the walls. You're not paying attention,
and,
right?
And Breanne said it earlier, is that then you act up, and then instead of maybe giving them more recess, they take away their recess, which they're sitting in a chair all day. They're removing their recess. And it just seems like a recipe for disaster, like this just situation that's not good. And I'm glad that we're focusing on it more. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then there was a bill that passed about cell phones in
Yes.
schools, right? You want us to tell a
Yes.
little bit more about that?
Yes. Yeah.
Bell to bell, no cell, right?
Yes, bell to bell, no cell. Well, and a little bit it translates, like you're saying, there's behavior issues in school from food and everything else. And I think a lot of times too, lack of parenting, we are now demanding that teachers parent children instead of teach children. And there's behavior issues not being addressed. And I think we have, just like kids are hooked on their phones, so are parents. And I think a lot of times, maybe that's controversial to say, but I mean, I have to be aware too, just in the work that I do, it's mostly on my phone, like putting away, not absently scrolling, like all that stuff. Like it's the same for us as it is for kids, and it's having the same impact on our brains. And so I think just really being more vigilant at home and paying attention and engaging and having conversations and all of that. But
that's so good.
Yeah.
Well, Breanne, just real quick, I want to speak to that because yesterday I had both the little ones with me, but it was a very busy day. So I was on the phone back and forth and I was texting, and noon got here, and I looked up and there was my 3-year-old, and I thought, I have not looked at his eyes yet today.
Yes.
And that broke my heart. Yeah. And so in that moment, I put the phone down and recognized that whatever was in my business at the time wasn't more important than that 3-year-old, like big-eyed looking at me. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not a forever thing, but I gave him 20 minutes of my life there. We interacted, and his personality and his demeanor changed. And it's almost like he went from a bad little boo-boo to a good kid. And just because of that parent interaction that I think it is easy to get distracted. So that was just a little life segment there. But
yeah. Everly says that to me. She said, Mom, look at me. Look at me. And it's like, and it's hard, like with work, it's like you go pick up kids at 3:15. Well,
the day is still going on.
Yes. And my phone is still ringing. And I'm like, and so I'll try to say, like, I will call you back after I get kids home from school. But sometimes I'm in the middle of a conversation. I'm like, okay, kid pickup, I got to go, but it's just hard just to make, an intentional choice to say, like, I will not be on the phone when I pick up my kids from school.
I think a whole other podcast could be a work-life balance with motherhood and versus 100%. What that looks like. So because, again, our roles have drastically changed in the last 50 years as a mom and a working parent.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this idea of the no cell or bell to bell no cell really came from the book The Anxious Generation. Yes. And, the governor's very passionate about it. And she's had the author here in Arkansas. I think he's in Northwest Arkansas.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, a couple months ago. And, like some local schools were already doing this.
Russellville was one of.
Russellville was not one of them.
Well, they was a
just
big controversy.
did.
Okay, so that's what I was remembering.
Yes, okay. They just recently did, and the governor gave some grant money out last year to schools that wanted to participate in a pilot project for it to use the pouches, and my thought on that is, like, I'm pretty agnostic on, like, what it is. I don't think we should tell schools, like, you have to use a pouch or you have to put it in a locker or you have to. It's like, all these schools are doing it different ways. Like the ones that were doing this before the book even came out, before those Yonder pouches were any kind of a big deal, they were just, maybe if it was a small school, the kids just left it in the office. If it was a bigger school, maybe they put it in their first period classroom or whatever. Yeah. And for me, that's like a local decision for schools to say, this is what works for us. And that's essentially what the bill does. It just says, like, hey, from bell to bell. So that's not including extracurriculars, because there's like debate over that too. Like, when is the end of the school day? Yeah. If you're out there running cross country or at football practice or whatever, now you can't really go back into the gym and call your mom or dad on the landline and say, practice is over early, come pick me up. So letting them still have access to a device. So it's just like, when you get to school, when the bell rings to dismiss school, you can't have any type of electronic device on you, including like a watch, a smartwatch, and stuff like that. And so, and then we left it up to the schools to decide disciplinary actions and how they would handle that. And I think it's helpful. School boards, we got a lot of feedback from them. They didn't really want to be the ones to make the decision, and take the heat. So sometimes you get like that. People want you in the legislature to take the heat.
The state says,
I know they're making us do it, and I get that. I mean,
You've been on the school board before.
I have been, yes.
You get it.
Yes, for 9 years. And I told people then, I said, look, I didn't run for school board to make friends. I came here to do work.
Ooh,
and,
good.
and I feel the same way about being in the legislature. And that's hard because you always have people mad at you and so, but you just have to say, like, what is the work I'm doing? Why does it matter to me? And is it worth it?
Yeah. Is it purposeful? Does it have meaning? Are you going to make a difference?
Yeah.
But
and hopefully it
all
changes.
you have to do is read that book just like halfway through.
Yeah.
To see the difference in behavior with kids that are on it all the time and then when they get off of it. And I remember one story with a girl that got dropped off at camp. They were having all kinds of problems. She got dropped off at camp. They didn't allow cell phones. And the parents said she was a different kid when they picked her up. Like she was just night and day difference. It was that sweet kid that they remembered. Then she gets back home. She gets back on the phones. And all of a sudden she turns back into that person that she was before she went to camp. So I think that was just a great example of, hey, these things have more power over these developing minds.
The chemicals in your brain. It's rewiring things.
Yeah, those pathways.
Yeah, and
neurological
so
pathways.
I think it's while they're at school, they are being heavily influenced by everything around them because they're at school as much as they're with us, right? So they're being influenced, and they're not only what they eat, but what they're being told, what they're being taught. And I noticed there's a lot of curriculum stuff that came through this session. It's one thing that Governor Huckabee has made a mission of hers is education, both in her first session in the LEARNS Act, which you were very heavily involved in, and then now in this session, she was in the secondary education with colleges and stuff like that. She was involved with that as well. So education is a big deal. We really appreciate her taking a look at these things. I think the cell phone thing is a great idea. And hey, sometimes you just have to be courageous and just do the hard thing. It's the right thing. But you just have to suck it up and do the right thing and know that you're going to get some blowback from it.
That's right.
And I've sat there and got blowback. You know it. Jody knows it. Small towns, you'll get more blowback sitting on the school board or the quorum court than you would if you're Senator Breanne Davis and sitting there. It's just the schools are important. So I think it's a good thing.
Have you received support from it? From maybe, let's say, parents? How do you feel? Like just...
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where the mixed bag is as parents. I think some are like great with it, and then some want to text their kid throughout the day and say, "How was lunch? How was your fourth period class?" Stuff like that. But I have found that teachers overwhelmingly support it because it kind of goes back to like we're asking them to like nanny in the classroom and to parent. And honestly, it's like they don't need to be wondering like who has a cell phone and who does, like, and then trying to say like, will you please put that away? Please do. It's like, no, let them teach. Let's bring it.
Do their job.
Let them do.
What they're passionate
and that's what
about.
They want to do. They don't want to sit and say, well, now you have detention. Now you have the, it's like they got to get to the lesson. They got to get to, the work that they need to do. And so, so I have found it really is not as controversial as, like I said, there are some parents that it's kind of a mixed bag, but like overwhelmingly educators really support it. And
I would too.
So,
Is there anything else on those?
What about the raw milk and the colostrum? Do we want to lead into that?
Yeah.
Where
we did a lot of really great food freedom things this session, in my opinion.
Well, that uprising, that movement is here, and I am thankful. I'm still young enough to take advantage of this.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, it is so funny because I was not in the legislature when they initially did the raw milk debate, but that was maybe 10 to 12 years ago, something like that, you know. And it was to legalize raw milk. And the law has been that you can only buy the raw milk on the dairy farm. Mm-hmm. Like you have to go there yourself to pick it up, and then those dairy farmers can only sell so many gallons a year. It's like really, really narrow. And it was a huge fight all those years ago to even get to that.
So was there any profit sharing? At one point, someone had said that you have to purchase a share.
Like a share of the cow.
to get the milk? No?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know.
Okay, just go ahead. It's
That-
okay.
that
Who
was-
knows?
yeah.
I haven't heard that, but that does not mean that that was not the law. Like maybe that's how they had to set it up on the farm or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like this session, we just went after it. And, we started there was a dairy farmer up in Northwest Arkansas talking to us about it and how it's impacting their family farm. So we said, let's work on a bill. Let's just do this. Now's the time, right? It's
Yeah.
the awakening
Right.
of,
That's right.
food freedom and MAHA and all. I mean, really COVID, I think, started the
I
awakening.
100%
I
agree.
agree.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And from there, it's we've been able to chip away at
Yeah.
things. And so, and then Logan Duval was just really helpful in it too. I had the bill drafted and I was not the lead sponsor on it, but we worked together with several members to make sure, if we're going to do this, let's do it right and include everything. So it includes cow and goat milk. It's all products derived from raw milk. I mean, cheese, yogurt, kefir, colostrum. Yes. I mean, it's
Wonderful.
14 different products or something. I don't, it's quite a long list. And you can buy it now at farmers markets. You can buy it at natural food stores. You don't have to be on site on the premise. It can be delivered. There just has to be a warning label on it that just says hey, this is a raw milk product.
Right.
So announcement. I took the boys to the Pope County Farmers Market last Saturday. First time I've ever seen. She had a raw milk, raw cheese, and it was a kefir out there.
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
was so excited to see
Yes.
that. So I thought, okay, it's working, Breanne. It's
Yes,
working.
that's good. And we put an emergency clause on that bill. So
Yeah.
most bills take effect 90 days after sine die, which is our official ending date.
Okay.
So typically it's late July, maybe the very beginning of August when those laws take effect. But if we put an emergency clause on something, it takes effect 30 days from the time that the bill was signed.
Okay.
So whenever we pass that, it's obviously it's
happened
already
now.
it's already in.
Yeah.
It's just
so
in.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Fresh off the press.
That's right. That's right. So.
If it's kind of that freedom of, it goes back to the Constitution. Hey, what's your pursuit of happiness? And well, my pursuit of happiness may be have a gallon of raw milk or raw cheese.
Yep.
Why does the government have anything to do with my milk?
That's right.
We've already done this. It's called prohibition. It was with alcohol. It didn't work really
That's
well
right.
with prohibition when we said you can't drink this stuff. It only
Yeah.
made people want to drink it more.
Yep.
So we kind of have an example of it doesn't really work. Government needs to be to let people do within bounds
Yep.
what is right for them and their family,
Yeah.
right? So it's a good move. Another good move, I think, the session that you and the rest of them did. I
Yes.
think that's good.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
So-
Maha.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were excited when RFK was put in that position for multiple reasons.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
really changed a lot for the good. All right, anything else on any of that? Am I missing? Are we good?
Did
Yeah.
I miss anything, Breanne?
Because I'm
I
gonna
think
switch
that was
on you a
good.
little bit. I'm gonna
Yes.
go to the more business side of the Arkansas.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Because as being in there for 7 years, you've seen a lot of change. You started underneath Asa, the Governor Hutchinson. Now you're underneath Governor Huckabee. So you've seen administrative change, and I would say both of them have been aligned in a lot of business-oriented stuff, and we've seen a trend over the last, since you've been there, in more business-oriented, trying to get businesses to Arkansas. So Forbes, this is coming out from Forbes Advisor, says Arkansas ranked number 3 best state to start a business in 2024. Area development placed Arkansas as number 12 in the nation. Top states for doing business, and then even Atlas Van Lines had number 1 state for inbound movers was Arkansas, with 65% of movers being inbound. Key reasons were job opportunities, affordability, and proximity to family. So you're seeing this trend. Arkansas
Yeah, we're getting noticed, aren't we?
we're getting
Yes.
noticed, and even on the real estate side of things, we've gotten noticed. We were number one.
We were
in-
number 1 or number 2 of the most moved to state last year.
Wow.
And because of those reasons that we're discussing.
So has that been an intentional thing on the state side that you have taken measures to say, okay, we have to be competitive. How are these other states being competitive, and how can we be more competitive? So is that, number one, has that been an intentional driving factor over the last 2 administrations? And do you see that, what are you doing now to keep that trend moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it's been intentional. I think it's something that it's easy to talk about, and it's been like a great talking point for years and years and years. But really, to be intentional about it, you have to like do some real work and make some real choices, about stuff. And so, I think that we've consistently been working to lower the income tax and also corporate tax. And so just trying to keep those around the same percentage and sort of be competitive. So we want to, make it easier, and we want people to do business here, to open businesses here. We want small business, large business, manufacturing, all kinds. And so we've really chipped away at that every session or in a special session. And you have to do it really in a responsible way, because that's a large portion of where we get our tax dollars to run the state, and you have to provide state services. Yes. So you can't just wipe out. I think Mississippi, I could be wrong on the state. It's a state around us, just announced recently that they're getting rid of their income tax.
Mississippi.
Okay,
Right.
yeah. But it's like over 25 years. People
Yeah.
are like, why don't you just take it to zero? It's like, well, you can't just take it to zero.
They worked their way there.
You really have to, take it a little bit at a time. And they're on a 25-year plan to do that.
Right.
And so, but then that also means that we have to make other choices about, different tax breaks that we give. And we have a lot of carve-outs in Arkansas. So, I think our revenue and tax committee has done really good work in just saying, like, look, we're going to let things out if they're revenue neutral, so we don't hurt our state's bottom line. Because we want to do good things for business and for people. But right now, our eye is on the prize, which is getting rid of the income tax. And so we have to make these choices over here that are hard because they sound good, they feel good, they are good, but they take away from our main goal, our main purpose, which is getting rid of that. And so, we have done a lot of work around that. And, a lot of our laws are just like a great example. We'll see it on our ballot in 2026 is to create economic development districts and give communities the opportunity to do that across Arkansas. I love it because it's a local issue. It puts it in the hand of local people, local voters, because they have to determine if they're going to take up a bond issue to, recruit some type of business or industry to their area that they deem is very important for their area.
Yeah.
And so then you have the people with local city councils and mayors and, whatever, working together to decide what's good for them. But right now in Arkansas, our definition of economic development and the way that you can incentivize economic development is very antiquated, and we are not competitive at all with states all across the country. So we actually lose businesses that are looking to move or relocate here or whatever that are like pretty large numbers. That would be huge in revenue impact to our state, which is what helps us be able to continue to lower income tax and things like that. If we're making up revenue by having people move here or having businesses come, we're making that up. And so right now there's a lot of things we cannot do. It is illegal. It's in our Constitution and it's in law. It's illegal to incentivize business in certain ways. But with this constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot, it will allow for us to have those economic development districts and communities that want to do so.
So basically, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
We are.
Right now.
What's an example of one of the incentives that you would love to see rolled out?
Well, I would love to see, I love Buc-ee's. It's near and dear to my heart. And I have my little Buc-ee's keychain down here I'll bring up. But let's just say, give for example, other states are able to incentivize, their local communities can say, hey, we're going to, maybe do a land agreement or do some kind of tax, we'll relieve you of taxes over this many years, knowing that the impact will be greater.
Sure.
There's a million other examples, whether it's, pick an industry, maybe they want to build something or whatever and say it's worth it to us to build this and incentivize you in this way. Or build this road for you or whatever. Right now, you can't build a road for a business. It has to be for the general common use and good. And that, so anyways, it's just, but when you look at what other states are doing and the way that they can incentivize, in ways that matter. It's not like we're going to put, some kind of store pop up on every corner.
Sure.
Doing this. But when you say, hey, we know the revenue impact to our area with this business is going to be huge over time. We've got the numbers. We can prove it. It's worth it to us to say we're going to invest or give, $10 million off on taxes over the next 15 years.
Yes.
I'm making up numbers, but because long term, it's doing this for us.
And that's what you're saying. You put back in the local government, the local people to decide.
Yeah, they get to decide.
So one of the things that Nate Harrison was on last podcast, and he talked about, and it was really surprising because we're having this tariff conversation. He says, he kind of pauses and he says, you know what? It's not as much about the tariffs. He says it's really about the regulations. He said what we need to see is more deregulation of what government requires, all these things to happen. And he said then the tariffs are basically inconsequential. Like it doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good point of saying what's really, we see and we talk about tariffs a lot, but really what it's talking about is what you've just mentioned, which is we got to deregulate to the point that it makes it easy for businesses to want. The incentive is I don't have to do as much to get here, to build, to operate, right?
That's right.
And that's what you're talking about in this. I hate that it's coming in 2026. I wish it was
I know.
this year, but I understand. Hey, it has to wait.
Yeah.
But is that kind of the trend of what you're talking about here? Is like, hey, we got to deregulate to get with the Texas, the Floridas, the whatever, the Tennessees.
Yeah, it's like government. Yeah, it's like get rid of that red tape. I mean, government is notoriously slow, and that's good. It doesn't need to be as nimble as private industry, but it also creates issues. And like for Arkansas, we're just like, we need to be a little more nimble. We've really, over the years, just have some really antiquated laws and have not gotten up to speed on economic development and what's important and what drives that. We just have people that have a lot of different opinions on it, and it's made it hard to get it on the ballot.
If you could point at one thing that you would say that is slowing it up, is it? I would say that just knowing the last two governors, I couldn't imagine that would come from the governor's office, even though you may tell me differently. But is it the House because it's got so many members, it's hard to get stuff through? Is it the Senate? Is it powerful lobbying that special interests are out there saying, hey, we're trying to slow this thing down on purpose because it's going to hurt us if more industry comes in, more competition? So what would you point at to say is the reason why that is such a slow play at times?
Yeah, well, I think first because you have to change our state constitution to give us the legal authority to do it. It's not just about passing a bill, which just requires majority vote. And to change our constitution, we only are allowed to pass out 3 things each session to refer out to the voters. So typically the House picks a constitutional amendment and we agree to it, the Senate, and then the Senate picks one and they agree to it. And then we typically have a joint resolution. We call it a joint resolution, but a joint constitutional amendment. Well, if you just have 3, there's probably like 50 filed, so you got to go through. So it goes through state agencies and the House and Senate. So there's 8 people on the Senate state agencies, 20 people on House state agencies. And like they have to do. So it's not even necessarily we don't like that. It's maybe just that's not the priority for us. And this one, there's been a lot of work in the last probably year to get this amendment the way that it needed to be. And we passed something on economic development maybe 10 years ago. I mean, if, it's been in the last, 10, 15 years. But it could have probably been written better, like hindsight, to enable some things. But it was the way that it was written. I think this will be a little more broad to allow us to pass some legislation to put some guardrails around it. But I think people have different, there's an argument to be made for retail even. Like, how is that considered economic development? And a lot of states allow for retail to participate in incentives if they're in an economic development district, like Texas, the way that they have their EDD set up, retail's included. So it's not, then people say, anyways, there's a debate around what is that? What does it mean? And, so you kind of get in the weeds on some of that stuff, but there's just some differing opinions on it.
So I'm going to put one plug in for an economic development that nobody talks about.
Yes.
Okay. And
A Torchy's taco.
That's a good one. That's a good
I
one.
love Torchy's.
That Tommy Lands and us talked about,
Yeah.
and I've talked to him many a times about it. I believe if we dredged this river out, the Arkansas River out, and we made it just a little bit deeper, you talk about the freight that comes up and down from the Mississippi all the way up to Tulsa. All right, it comes across all of Arkansas. I think if we just spent some time, effort, energy on making that deeper, and we put a lot of emphasis on that, because gas is expensive, diesel is expensive,
Yeah.
freight is expensive, but you put an extra couple tons on that barge that goes up and down the river, it incentivizes them. It's cheaper, all right, because it's just water. I mean, it's just there's not a whole lot of gas involved in that, and I think that's one area that we could really emphasize. It's not sexy, but it's really something that we could do to make businesses to get more freight from Little Rock to Tulsa, and to get revenue up around those ports. So just a plug.
Okay,
now a lot of that's federal stuff too. So no, that's not just you. That's federal. That's Corps of Engineers. But I really believe that could be a great economic boom that we don't talk about, and it's just right here. You know, but it's across all the states. So anyways.
That's interesting.
Just a plug in there.
Yeah.
I like it.
It would.
All right. So before we get out of here, I always ask 2 questions, or at least I try to.
Yes.
And I don't tell you about these questions ahead of time. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What 3 books would you tell somebody that's been really influential in your life?
Okay.
3 books that you say, yep, they need to read these because they meant a lot to me.
Yes. Oh man. Okay. I'm gonna have to pull up I've been listening to a lot of books on Audible lately.
Yes. Same.
Oh man, there is one by hang on. Ask me your second question, and I'm gonna look
Okay.
up.
Okay.
I just don't. I know his name. It's Viktor Frankl, but I don't.
Oh yeah, that's.
But he's written.
Is that the one where he was in an internment camp?
Yes.
And
A Man's Search for Meaning.
That's right.
He's written several books, but I was like, I know there's one that I read that was like so good.
That
one is really good.
Yeah.
Man's Search for Meaning. It's just so interesting. He talks about like the like it's hope that keeps people alive, and when you lose hope, that like so because he was like a doctor, he was like very, very smart, and had a whole different type of like psychology school of thought. And so he talked about like seeing people that survived like towards the end, like people that died like the day before the war ended, and how when he knew people were going to die, and it was when they lost hope. And he just said it was like it's a really good, and he talks and he gets into like the medical side of it of know his work and everything, and I just like it's just so interesting on human behavior.
Yes.
And like what drives us and all of that. And like I said earlier, politics is so much human behavior, and it's just so interesting to me to understand like what motivates people, how they function, and you can just read people in a different way. I think after doing this work for a little bit, but it's I really, really enjoyed that. Like this is probably like cliche a little bit, but I did love Atlas Shrugged. It's been so long since I've read it by Ayn Rand, and that's really like a foundational, like really good book, And I don't know a third one. I mean, I'm just trying to think of like all the memoirs I've read, and like I love like World War II fiction. I read a lot of that, but I've also read some like really interesting like memoirs of people that have like survived really hard things. And I think it's like I was talking to John Paul, my husband, about this the other day. Like our kids are growing up pretty easy, like life's pretty easy, and if you watch stories of people who do like really great things, they had a hard life
growing up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like you look at athletes, you look at people who like look at anything, and it's like they excelled because they had struggle. It's like they gave them like that fire, that drive.
Yes.
And I'm like, I just worry about that sometimes. I'm like, what's going to drive, like what gives them that drive to say, like, I love it. Like, I don't want them to have a hard life. Like, we don't want to, like, that's why we like have the life we do for, you work hard. So your kids have a good life, and you don't want them to obviously like some of the things people have gone through are like horrible. Abuse and stuff like that.
Right.
But, or like, their parents like addicted to drugs, strung out somewhere, like horrible things like that. But I'm like, what, so I think like reading books like that, like memoirs, are really interesting, that people that have survived hard things.
It's like, even if our children don't struggle to that degree, they can read about it and maybe not relate, but like feel that same type of maybe struggle. And maybe internally that will even motivate just to stay out of that even. I agree.
Yes.
I've often wondered, like, what's going to light us up? Like,
That's right.
What's going to be, because I've had a great life and I'm thankful for that. But there's a daily grind. I mean, you get up, and of course I believe in the Lord and Jesus Christ every day for my Savior. And I think that He gives me that passion. And so, thankfully, I think that it can also be created, from the Lord, thank goodness. But, I agree with you. There's so much there. Caleb and I both are very passionate people. And so right now I'm very passionate about our health. And so I'm really glad we were able to speak to that. I think that that's a turning point. And, and then good literature, good reads, good stories, stories that can motivate and awaken this next generation.
Yeah. And see how people took something, nothing to something. Or, really, like, I think those things are interesting. And I think politics has been good. I think I thought it was harder. I thought it was going to be harder on my kids when they were younger, but it is harder the older they get. They see a lot more and hear a lot more of like what people are saying, and it's like about their mom. And so
don't talk about my mom that way.
And so they're very justice driven, which is funny. And John Paul and I are both justice driven, and so it is like teaching them just like, how do we respond to people? How do we want to be like, how, and so so anyways, I'm sure I have a third book, but it's okay. Just like any good like memoir where it's like, man, beat the odds.
So you're, if I'm not mistaken, you're the only woman in the Senate right now. Is that right?
No, there's 5 of us.
There's 5 women. Okay.
Yes.
But it's a very small pool, right? So is there a historical woman, and it doesn't have to be historical, but a woman that you've kind of looked at and said, hey, that's kind of my mentor to say, in this area. It doesn't have to be politics, but just in life or whatever. Is there somebody that you said, hey, that's kind of, I've read, I've liked, or I've seen, I've been around as a mentor? Anybody that kind of comes to your mind?
Well, I think there's been people at different stages of life. Like, I do feel like I was lucky. I mean, I grew up like high school, college, like volunteering in political things, and there were always adults that like took the time, I feel like, to invest in me, and just like, even if it was like a small thing at a parade for an hour or whatever, like talk to me, like to help me learn, to help me, so I feel like there's been people along the way that I like love different things about them. And, like I can remember like Sharon Trusty back when I was in high school was like so kind and always, was like, willing to take the time and just talk to me like I was a human, like I was a little kid.
Former senator from this area. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And then, people that you look at, just like inspirational stories you've read, or people that you don't know like in person, but you're like, man, that's really cool, like what they're doing or how they're handling that. And I do feel like I pull a lot from strong women. Like I love to read those stories about just like crazy things that, women did that just like defied the odds in their time.
Do you have a particular favorite? Do you have one that comes to mind?
I don't have a particular favorite, but like one person I love right now is Katie Britt. She's a U.S. Senator in Alabama. And like, she is, she's around our age. And she was in a 3-way primary at least when she was running for that U.S. Senate seat. And she was like polling dead last. Like they were like, get out of the race. Like, what are you doing? And she was like, I'm going to work, and she like worked and ended up winning. And it was just unbelievable. And listening to her talk, like she came to Arkansas and did some events, and it's just, she's so passionate. Like she just like, you're like, I believe in what you're saying. You're just like in on what she's saying and doing. And I love that. People that like compel you. You're like, yes, they like compel you to do, whatever. So like, I think about that, and so cool. And I love that. And there's not, it's like, I do this work, because I love it, there are not a lot of moms in this space. And, so when you're talking about, I don't know how many women are in the House, but if you just look at Republican women in our state legislature, that's like, there's under 20 of us out of 135 members. And I am the only one that I know of that
With
has
children,
kids at home.
kids at home.
Now there may be one in the house that has like a
Yeah.
junior or senior left in school, but of all the women, I was the first woman to give birth while serving in the legislature, but just like no one has like young school aged kids that are conservatives.
Yeah.
Right.
Now there are some women on the Democrat side that are elected to the legislature that do, but it takes all kinds.
Yep.
Like we need all voices at the table. And if there's no one there that is a mom that has kids at home, like raising kids right now, not 20 years ago, like we need that too.
Right.
But we need women that
Yes.
are in that phase of life right now. And man, we don't have enough of that. And I just like love brave women who get out and do hard things. It's like, and so we just need more of that. We need, like, we are capable. I think like we have the time, we have time for things we make time for. We're capable. And we just like, I want to see more women stepping up to be like, I'm doing it. Like for my kids, for my future or whatever,
Yes. And
That's
a good
great.
friend of ours just started as well. I think, and I won't mention her
Yes,
name, but
I'm so excited.
I just think the fact that maybe you're making an impact on some of their
Yes.
lives. So just speak up and
Yeah.
speak out. I love it, Breanne.
Yes, thank you. It
Thank
makes me
you
emotional. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be
so
rude, but
Yeah.
it's
good.
important work.
It's great work.
So
It's really important,
Yes.
and you're doing a great job. And
We
and
appreciate you.
You're a great leader, and that's the reason.
Thank you.
The last question is, what's your definition of leadership? I mean, you have
man.
just laid out some amazing points, and I think everybody could just say, you talked about the lady in Alabama. Hey, I'm all in. Whatever you say, I'm all in. You're very passionate, and you're very passionate. But what makes a good leader in your minds?
Well, I mean, I think a few different things. One, having a backbone. Like, the older you get, I think you think, oh, when I'm an adult, adults will be this way, or adults, you think you sort of like grow up and mature, and you often find that that's not the case. We're just adults, like we're an age, which is a number, and not all of us have learned how to deal with conflict or confrontation. And I always say, like, confrontation is not negative, does not have to be a negative thing. Like, it is healthy, and it is something we must do.
Right.
But I think being a leader a lot is really keeping your word. I mean, I think that's so important, and it's a lost character trait. I think it's a lost character trait. But I always say, like, at the end of the day, I'm going to make people mad. I know, like, it's not easy out there. You have to have super thick skin, but then you're still human. And sometimes people forget that. But the only person that sleeps with their decisions at night is me. Like, I sleep with the votes that I make. I sleep with how I treat people, what I commit to do, if I keep my word. And so to me, I think being a leader is that. I mean, I think you have to be able to be someone that they know, like, you have a reputation. Like, they know if you've told them something and they hear something different, they're like, that's not true because she told me this. Like,
Right.
Your reputation precedes you. People know it about you.
Yes.
And I think really listening, being able to listen. I was so bad at that in my 20s. They always say, like, don't listen like while you're thinking of what you're going to say next. Listen to what the person's saying and try to like meet them where they're at. I think that is I think that's a lost skill. But I've seen really impactful people do that. And I'm like, oh man, that's not how I would handle that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like learning from it,
Right.
Yep.
And so I think hitting things head on like that is a really big deal. I just had one other thing that I thought was good, but it's
Well,
it just left my
to go
brain.
to your point, so we got Pottsville Schools invited us to come talk to some students, some business class over at Arkansas Tech, and I made them look at each other for 10 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
I think I said,
yeah.
There was lots
"Would
of
you-"
giggling.
Yeah,
going
there's lots of
on. They
giggling.
just
Some of
couldn't
them,
hardly do it.
couldn't do it. Some of them were like that was their best friend, so they didn't care. But that's a missed point that a lot of people don't make. Put your phone down.
Yeah. Look.
Look at them. Listen to them.
Yeah.
God gave you 2 ears and one mouth, so you'd listen twice as much as you talk.
Yes,
right?
that's right. That's
so,
right.
we miss that. And then there's this relationship that you build when you do that, right? So when you talk to a constituent or you talk to somebody else, another senator or representative, you're sitting there listening to their concerns. You may not agree with their concerns. You might not agree with their viewpoint, but you take the time to listen to them. And I would say, and you tell me if I'm wrong, most of the time they're going to come out of there respecting you more, even though y'all didn't agree, because you simply listen to them and their concerns.
Absolutely.
Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that a lot.
And that's leadership. So to go back here, that's leadership.
Yeah.
That's what we don't have a lot of because we feel like we can put it on the internet and the keyboard warriors, right? So I don't have to listen to you. Your opinion's dumb, stupid, you're idiotic, and I can just put it out there. I don't have to listen to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we miss this. We're missing this humanism part of in this country, big time.
Yeah.
You're still human. I don't care if you're on the other end of it or not. Listen to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say like, it's like courage is not acting like without fear, it's acting in spite of your fear. I think that's like, I think with leaders, people think, well, a leader is courageous, meaning never afraid. And leaders know, like they're experts, they know everything. And I'm like, people act time and time again in spite of their fear. I think that's very courageous. I mean, that is courage. And I think leaders are people willing to do that. And a lot of people won't. They'll just be afraid and say, I don't think I should because of whatever, even when it's the right thing. And another thing I've seen some leaders, in my opinion, do well is just like ask, like, what does that mean? Or like, what is that? And it's like stuff you're thinking, you're like, I don't know what that is, but you think everyone else at the table does. And I've seen some really influential people just say like, will you explain that to me? What is that? I haven't heard of that. And I'm like, okay, it kind of gives me the freedom to say, okay, I can ask that. And it's actually not a dumb question. Maybe sometimes it is, but it doesn't matter. I've seen like that shows you're a lifelong learner.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
I
right.
see some humility there as well, that they're willing to show that side of them and be comfortable in that.
Yeah. That's right.
I think the quote that you're trying to think of, courage is not the absence of fear.
Yes. Thank you.
It's the realization that there's something more important.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your courage. To run for office is not easy in today's time, especially for 7 years, being a mother. And you defend yourself well and you listen well. And we've always had a good relationship because I know we may not always see eye to eye, but 90% of the time we do.
Yeah.
But you're going to listen. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being here today. We've been through a lot, and we look forward. We think the future looks bright, right?
Yes,
The future looks bright in the state. I think
Bright
we're
and
moving
healthy.
bright and healthy. That's right. We're going to clean it up in more than one way.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
thank you for being here today.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining the Caleb and Jody Moore podcast today. If you like what you heard, just hit the like and subscribe button there below.
And we want you to be a part of the process. So if you have questions or topics that you'd love for us to cover, please add them in the comment or send us a message.